Well, Jim Bethell is with me now. Thank you for joining me, Jim. Why didn't the Conservatives have the guts to abolish NHS England, do you think?
Well, because it's a phenomenally challenging, difficult thing to do, and it's going to be really messy, Peter. The idea that this can be done overnight is for the fairies. What's going to happen is there's going to need to be a huge unpicking of all the responsibilities between the department and NHSE. NHSE itself is made up of many other smaller organisations that were consolidated into sort of one mega quango over the years. So they will have to be, as it were, liberated, and that may require legislation. And the people concerned are all going to have to rewrite their job descriptions, find their roles. Some will lose their jobs, but a lot of them will remain in place. And the whole thing will take quite a long time to sort out. So there is a reason why we didn't do it, but I wish we had grabbed the nettle and done it.
What will be the impact, do you think? You're saying this can't be done overnight. It's a very, very complex thing. West Streeting, of course, said he didn't want any top-down reorganisations. This, to me, very much looks like a top-down reorganisation.
Yes.
For patients themselves, will things get better, do you think? Are you optimistic about that?
Well, listen, I think if you step back, the idea that it's going to liberate a ton of money for frontline services isn't right. Actually, there'll need to be quite a lot of money spent on redundancy payments, and that will probably eat up all the headcount savings for a while. So like a lot of reorganisations, it doesn't suddenly liberate lots of cash. Where I think the dividend will be is that for a long time, the managers were in charge, and they didn't actually deliver the kind of long-term strategic vision or the kind of financial responsibility that you kind of hope the managers would do. In fact, actually, they really struggled to change the operating model and the priorities of the NHS. They struggled to maintain the morale of the workforce. And the NHS is notoriously bad at keeping within a budget. So it's actually going to be, ironically, the ministers and the Secretary of State who are going to drive these reform agendas. And things like the pivot to prevention, the building out of more community, and the adoption of new technologies, the three big reforming agendas of the moment. And by the way, they've been the same for years. I think they're going to be driven through with more ambition, and that's where we're going to see a change.
There's also quite a number of people, we've got some statistics today, the number of people considered too sick to work has risen almost fivefold since the pandemic and lockdowns. We know that this is, of course, the Department of Work and Pensions are looking into this. Rachel Reeves and Liz Kendall, who's the Welfare Secretary, looking into what can be done to try and get some money out of that. But more than 1.8 million people are now at the highest rate of universal credit, compared to just 360,000 at the start of the pandemic in 2020. We're a much sicker nation. How does the NHS respond to that, Jim?
Well, I'm really worried about this part of it because the NHS has an instinctive tendency to prioritise late-stage acute treatment. It is basically pretty good at running hospitals. And we have some pretty fancy hospitals, and we tend to drive people and encourage them to report to hospitals. But in order to prevent people from getting sick in the first place, you have to be better at public health and catch the disease earlier and work with people before they actually show a load of symptoms. I am worried that this big reorganisation, rather than accelerating the move upstream, we call it the step left, to try and tackle disease earlier, it's actually going to reinforce the NHS's worst tendencies to prioritise hospitals. So listen, the NHS should be involved in stopping people from getting ill. Actually, it's better at treating them when they're sick.
How do you feel as a Conservative that you see a Labour government now with a huge majority doing things that might have just been put in the too difficult box for the Conservatives? You talked about NHS England and wishing the Conservatives had had the guts to abolish it. Similarly with welfare reform, Rachel Reeves and Liz Kendall, they'll face a backlash. They'll have all sorts of different rebels and people voting against it within their own party, but they've got the majority to do it. Is that a source of annoyance for you or frustration that actually there were things that welfare reform, something a lot of Conservatives would have liked to have done, but again, perhaps in the too difficult box?
Well, I wish West Streeting well. He and I agree on more things than we disagree. And the agenda that he's pursuing is pretty much the same agenda that we were pursuing. And I really hope he's successful, because I want our nation to succeed. And I think he's a well-intentioned guy trying to do the right thing. I am therefore pleased that they're using their parliamentary majority to drive through things that we found really difficult. I do find it strange that they didn't arrive with a clearer, better, well thought through set of plans. I mean, it's been 8 months. It is really
why is that, do you think? I know exactly what you mean, and I think there is still a sense that Labour is slightly making it up as they go along. They're having a lot of reviews, they're setting up quite a lot of quangos and so on. They don't seem to know exactly what they want to do. Wes Streeting previously said he didn't want top-down reorganisation. Now he says it wasn't something that was on his agenda, but he's changed his mind. I do wonder whether there was really a plan.
Well, I find it baffling, to be honest, Peter. I think there are three potential causes. One is, I think they thought they were well-intentioned, good people, and if they just applied their intelligence, a lot of things that the Tories had made a mess of would actually prove to be quite easy. And that complacency is wrong. I think Sue Gray was quite disruptive. They call it Long Sue in Labour circles, and she didn't encourage a culture and a discipline around providing plans. I think that Keir Starmer himself is not very political. He didn't take a lot of interest in these things. We had, the case on the Tory side was Ian Duncan Smith, who was previous leader, arrived at DWP with a socking great big plan, Broken Britain, a two-folder plan, and handed it to civil servants. He'd briefed them already, and they cracked on and did a lot of heavy. And
it comes in as well, Jim. Sorry to interrupt you, but it comes in as well. For example, with grooming gangs, rape gangs, where I just sort of think the Home Office will have known and will have planned. Jess Phillips is probably going to be the victims minister. We know what she says. We know what she thinks on this issue. Let's have a plan to go ahead and change things. And really, they did. I mean, the Conservatives did nothing for 18 months with the proposals from the review. But you would imagine Labour would have had a plan. It's a very interesting one. Maybe we'll return to that. But just before you go, Jim, I just want to ask you about one other issue, which is this sentencing body to review the objections of Shabna Mahmood and Keir Starmer, which I share very strongly in regard to this two-tier justice, this idea that if you are of an ethnic minority, or if you are gay or trans or have some other protected characteristic, that you should be thought of differently in regard to a pre-sentencing report. Now the Sentencing Council is going to take a bit of a look at it, but in my view it shouldn't have got to where it was at the start. What's your view?
Yeah, I totally agree, Peter. Listen, I feel personal about this because I'm in the frame for not getting the benefits of those sentencing reviews. I'm in a mixed marriage. My children, who do have minority characteristics, would be treated differently to their father in the eyes of the law. This is crazy. This is exactly what we fought world wars to avoid. I think the whole thing has gone mad. I'm really sad that it was Conservative ministers who let it slide through in the first place. I think there's some culpability there. But the Sentencing Council have really lost it on this one.
Someone said to me recently, they said, well, it's because, well, actually David Lammy was writing and said that, perhaps the magistrates and perhaps judges, High Court judges, wouldn't necessarily have understand what it's like to be an ethnic minority or to be from a poor background. To which I said, well, do they understand what it's like to be a paedophile, a rapist, or a murderer? I mean, I expect not.
We expect more from our judges. I agree.
Yeah. Jim, thank you. That's Jim Bethell there, Lord Bethell. He is a former Conservative Health Minister. Let me know what you think about what he has said.